And together, we will move mountains. And if they don't hear our message, then we'll just do it over and over and over and over 1,000 times again for you. And I'll rise up, I'll rise like the day, I'll rise up in spite of I will rise, we will rise, we will rise, we will rise.
Hello, my name is Michelle Zabel and my pronouns are she and her. I'm an assistant dean at the University of Maryland School of Social Work and the proud director of the Institute for Innovation and Implementation. Today, I'm just delighted to welcome you to this Training Institute live workshop. As you might have come to expect with all your favorite conferences, the Training Institutes are now virtual. And although I know we'd all like to be together in person, we are excited to host the Virtual Training Institutes and really want to encourage you to continue to join us on the first Thursday of every month through August. Each month, you'll have a choice of 2 back-to-back workshops. So mark your calendars, choose your workshops, and make sure you reserve your place early so that you can attend the workshop that most interests you. Today, I want to encourage you to actively participate by using the chat to post your questions. Post your comments and share your resources with your colleagues. Our presenters, they definitely want to hear from you. And it is absolutely your participation that will make each of these sessions a success. As a reminder, staff are monitoring the chat and they're going to make sure the facilitators see your questions and comments, so be sure and engage. A few other reminders to include: if you need assistance at any time navigating through these virtual spaces or accessing links to workshops, we do have a live help desk support standing by to assist. We are also providing a certificate of attendance after the completion of each workshop, and all of our workshops are being recorded, so by you participating, you're implying consent. Finally, there will be an ASL interpreter or closed captioning available during each workshop. Those interpreters can be pinned when available for those who require interpretation by hovering over the interpreter's video and selecting the 3 dots. One of the options that will appear is Pin Video. By selecting the Pin Video, this video will not move out of view. With our theme, What Could Be? Bolder Systems and Brighter Futures for Children, Youth, Young Adults, and Their Families, all of our sessions will challenge us to envision a future where the voices of children, youth, young adults, and their families are elevated, especially those who are most frequently silenced or marginalized, where we use the best data and research available to challenge ourselves, developing new ideas and approaches that can be implemented to meet the needs of youth and families, and in service of our commitment to social justice and the elimination of disproportionality and disparities. My hope is that today's session will provide you with food for thought as you consider your next steps in creating a vibrant, equitable future for youth with complex needs and their families. Please don't forget to register for next month's workshop. Remember, they're held the first Thursday of every month, and you can visit the institute.umaryland.edu for the full schedule.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this part of the National Training Institutes. My name is Ellen Kagan. It is so nice to be back. And I am one of the founders of the Coach Approach Partners. And we're so excited to bring you today the Coach Approach, a workforce development strategy that changes the conversation. I want to frame this session for all of you. Number one, the system of care asks us to change paradigms and change the way we approach our work in serving children, youth, and young adults and their families. And leading change is not easy. And I know all of you out there are saying, yeah, it's not easy. And so here's what we need. We need to be thinking about ourselves in the sense that all of us are leading change, not just the people with titles. You can lead from the side of the table. You can lead from any part of the community. And so when you hear us use the word leader today, we really come from the worldview that all of you participating today, if you're here, if you care about making the world a better place, you are a leader. Now, the system of care movement was designed to bring different voices and opinions to shared spaces and shared tables. But it hasn't yet equipped us with the kinds of communication skills that help us manage this diversity of perspective and how we use our voice and our presence to honor all of that diversity and to come to shared visions, shared goals, shared expectations so that we can move forward together. So in this workshop, we're going to be talking about the mindsets and the skill sets that all of us need to be bringing into our work more effectively so that we can raise the voices of everyone about what could be in changing the conversation and moving it forward. And with that, the coach approach is powerful, and I'm going to turn it over to my colleague and friend, Val Olds.
Thank you, Ellen. Hello, everyone. It's my pleasure to be here. I'm Valerie Olds. I am a family member, lived experience. I have a son who's now a young adult who's on the autism spectrum. And I also am the senior administrator for children and families for the Philadelphia Department of Behavioral Health and Intellectual Disability Services. I'm also a trainer through Coach Approach Partners, thanks to Ellen and her partner. And it's my pleasure to be here today again. I'm going to now turn it over to my friend and colleague, Mark.
All right, so welcome. Good afternoon and good morning, everybody. My name is Mark Durgan. I'm the project director for the Pennsylvania Care Partnership. With Ellen and Val, I'm one of the instructors and trainers for the Coach Approach to Adaptive Leadership, bringing this work across Pennsylvania. And it's been a pleasure and a great experience to bring this work and to change the conversations around how we interact, how we engage, and how we empower each and every one. And with that, we want to get an idea of who is in the room. So we should have a poll that will be popping up in just a moment. And we want to know who's here. We ask this information with this slide and the next, so it really helps us understand the audience to really make this presentation individual and meeting the needs of everyone here. All right. So it looks like we have majority of the individuals are system partners and community agencies with some providers and a small selection of youth and family. We appreciate you spending your time with us. All right. So next, we want to kind of get an idea of what kind of work are you doing for those that are in the field. We want to know, are you a supervisor or manager, provide that area of direct care, program policy, administrative, peer support, training and consulting. Maybe you fall into that other category. So take a moment and help us sort of pull out. Okay, so we looks like we're a good number of consultants and trainers, a lot of policy and administrative, and we have supervision and management here as the predominant voices. So thank you for everyone who participated in that poll. So now we are going to ask that you use the chat. As I said, we really want this training to be meeting your needs. And the best way for us to know how to meet your needs is to find out, what do you want out of this workshop? What do you want to understand about coaching, the coach approach, and how can we effectively make this the best experience for you that we can?
So in the chat, folks are saying that they want to learn how to be a better coach, that they would like to really ensure that their community is around helping those in their community succeed. My apologies. Implementing the coach approach within the developmental disability system. Folks would like to just learn more to improve overall service delivery. A lot of be a better coach. There are some folks with some shout outs too that are saying hi. They know you guys. So, just know you have friends in the participant pool. Some folks would like to use and enhance their skills around coaching in early childhood, being a stronger coach and mentor for other folks, better incorporating coaching strategies into training, some wraparound peeps in the audience, yay, a shout out for them, and really just learning more about the model and how it can be useful to support families and staff in their partnerships.
All right, so great. I think that's all areas that we can definitely cover. I saw a couple in there that were really of interest in the idea of kind of how is this being implemented in other communities and to really help affect change in the community itself, which was a comment that I really appreciate. And I think that we'll really dive into a lot of these questions and goals and work to meet them today. You'll see that the coach approach and the model itself is driven by the people that we work with. It's driven by the idea that every single person that we engage is a leader, from a system partner to a family member. They all have vision, they all have drive in how we are interacting, and we support them in that. So why do we do this? So why are we doing this initiative? The coach approach, as Ellen had said, can really be utilized at a system table, in supervision, colleague to colleague, as a approach to work with clients and families. And I think the biggest reality is it can be used in everyday lives with our families, our loved ones, and those that we care about. This allows the system itself, the individuals, the people in the system, to live their values and really show them in action through this model. So the problem that we were trying to solve was, how do we more effectively communicate and empower individuals, from systems to families to youth to organizations and providers? How do we empower them to be able to speak effectively, make decisions, and be empowered in order to not be directed, not be told this is what you need, but to really change that conversation, in that we believe individuals that come to us with questions, the questions that are gray, that have multiple answers, we truly believe those individuals know what they need and what's going to be best for them. And from that, we started to work with Ellen Kagan in about 2017 to provide a training called Adaptive Leadership for System Change. to bring an understanding of how we are as leaders and reflect internally on our leadership styles. The belief is that every single person from any chair is a leader. From that, we saw the value in changing this idea of a coaching conversation. And we brought in to adaptive leadership created by Beth Greenland of the Coach Approach Partners. Great experience. We had multiple grants from system care grants from across Pennsylvania come together, our state and local leaders, youth and family, to understand and learn this coach approach model. We saw the value in how we were changing our conversations, how we were seeing things differently, how we were taking less responsibility for ourselves and passing that responsibility and that work onto the people that were coming to us with questions. So from there, we decided we could not just do this with Ellen and Beth coming in to train us, and we needed to change how we were going to do this work. So we worked with the Coach Approach Partners and developed 8 trainers from a variety of backgrounds across Pennsylvania to operate and make this transition into a statewide Coach Approach mindset. We developed this mindset and developed this way of coaching and way of training to really change how we were doing things, from child welfare to juvenile justice. This coach approach to adaptive leadership and leadership coaching is such a powerful tool in how we interact that we wanted to really develop this into this larger piece, including how we were going to evaluate and determine what and how we were showing the successes. So who is a leader? I've said it multiple times, and Ellen's also said it. We are all leaders. Every single person that we encounter, every single person in this webinar is a leader. We have voice, we have vision, and we have understanding. And from our voices, we influence change. And that's really our goal, from system of care approach to how we work with youth and family. We want to see change, we want to see independence, and we want to see empowerment. So that's who we are. We're all leaders, and we all have great voice.
So having worked in the technical assistance field since my 20s with the National Technical Assistance Center on Children's Mental Health at Georgetown, began to notice that one of the things that gave people status in the world was this idea of having expertise. Having expertise means I know the answer to your problem. And the good news about that, in a way, is that very often we have, as leaders, this real desire to fix things, to solve problems. And even as we're listening to others, we are using our expertise, constantly thinking about fixing things with the idea of, I know, therefore I know what you should do next. We are asking all of us to rethink this paradigm. Because in the coach approach, we are actually walking with tremendous humility and tremendous curiosity. And our expertise is actually in the fact that we don't know what the answer to the problem is. And we actually believe that the answer rests inside the person or persons with the challenges. Our job is shifting from telling what we know and what we think others should do, and actually going into more of an exploratory and partnership conversation so that the answer, which rests inside the other person, comes out. This is really, to the coach approach, the essence of empowerment. The essence of empowerment is that the person themselves actually designs their own future. And that goes without saying that we have our expertise, we'll always have our expertise, and we can always offer every now and then what we know, or what a best practice might be, or what another state is doing, or what another system is doing. Always we have that in our toolkit, so to speak. But we need to see much more of this opportunity to not believe that we know what the other person should be doing. So to that end, we also think this is a great way to think about the idea of history and diversity. So I wanted to put out there just as a thought for all of us, and I'm just really so loving this quote from James Baldwin. You know, the system of care really exemplifies an embrace of diversity, and that the diversity amongst us is really the fuel and the engine that drives the future forward. And as I mentioned a moment ago, humility and curiosity will really allow us to go deeper, to find out who this person is in front of us. And I can never know another person's history, but they know. They know what their history is. And people come to the table with all sorts of experiences, opportunities, conversations in their heads. And all of that impacts their thinking and their behaving as we're trying to create alignment among all of us. And because they bring in their own history, they also bring in their own memory. So I would ask you in this room, how many of us have been in spaces where we have felt not safe, where we have felt not seen or not heard? This happens all the time if we're not intentional about our communication and not intentional about our understanding about this invisible history that comes to all of the collaborative tables that we're a part of. History is not merely something to be read, and it does not refer merely or even principally to the past. On the contrary, the great force of history comes from the fact that we carry it within us, are unconsciously controlled by it in many ways. And history is literally present in all that we do. It could scarcely be otherwise, since it is to history we owe our frames of reference, our identities, and our aspirations. The coach approach allows all of us to both embrace our history and go up to the balcony and kind of view our history and determine which parts of our history are supporting our aspirations and which parts of our histories do we maybe need to quiet down just a little bit so that we can actually hear the perspectives of others and change the conversation as we go forward.
So as we think about changing the conversation to support equity and inclusion and honoring diversity, our value proposition in this is that the coach approach can be used as a powerful tool in creating that space to establish trust in our interactions. Because as Ellen just pointed out, we all bring our respective histories to the table. And we don't need to have the same experiences in our lives as others, right? And we bring them to the conversation with the intention to authentically connect with one another. And at the same time, we know our own histories, and we are self-aware of that. And we are self-aware of some of the biases we may hold. And if we do, to hold those lightly when we're in those spaces. And we are often unaware of the other's history or what they're bringing to the table. And so when we are in those kinds of conversations or at those tables, it may heighten some of those issues for us. And again, being mindful of that. And the safety of being safe, seen, and heard allows for the ability to build trust. And I'm going to say a little more about that piece. I come to this work as a woman of color and have found that the coach approach to adaptive leadership really has created that sense of safety that is so necessary when I enter into certain conversations or am invited or invite myself to certain tables that, ordinarily might trigger my spidey sense around, being hesitant, being guarded, wondering what's really going to happen here. Will I be okay in this space? And for many marginalized people, being seen and heard is not the norm. It is not the typical experience. In fact, we are often invisible and sometimes even silenced. And as we describe later on, the mindset and the skill sets of the coach approach, it is that which really does allow for that sense of trust to develop. Because why? Because it really does allow the person to truly feel seen and heard. It's a powerful thing.
So how do we do this? How do we do this in meetings? How do we bring others to the conversation? As this idea of a coach approach leader, it's our job to bring these other people into the room and to bring that sense of safety and that sense of understanding that we are all coming from a shared space that is the faith and the belief that we are here for a good and valid reason and that we're coming to these tables with the authentic voice to make change. So one of the things that we have done over time is created some rules, created some guidelines in how we are interacting in meetings and how we are coming forth to facilitate these robust and open dialogues. This goal of creating a psychological space where people can feel safe, seen, and heard. We adapted this from the book Deep Change, Discovering the Leader Within by Robert Quinn. In many of our meetings, we start off with this idea of this ground set of rules, working on suspending our assumptions. People hold on to what others say and make assumptions about the meaning of what is said, especially when it's a little bit opposite of their own position. We have to work to examine our underlying assumptions and seek not to defend them, but to understand those assumptions as colleagues. The other piece of this is looking at each other as equal. We ask individuals to leave their positions at the door. We speak as a community of individuals with thoughts and feelings, with equal voice, while honoring our lived experience. The value and knowledge that comes from that experience is what helps us make change. And the most important part of this is we support the spirit of inquiry. We explore thinking behind each other's views, with being safe and feeling and having people feel seen and heard. These deep-seated assumptions that individuals may hold, including ourselves, are views. And we have to really understand that it's okay to inquire about these views, inquire about what's being said, inquire about what's not being said. It's our job as leaders is to hold our judgment and not hold that bias full, and to ask these open and honest questions so that we can fully understand the varying points of view. Through this is really this idea of how we can make people feel safe, seen, and heard, coming into this kind of idea of a shared understanding.
So how does system of care align with coach approach? I am involved in system of care in Philadelphia. And I can tell you that, being very familiar with system of care for many, many years, and most recently just learning about coach approach. There's no question in my own experience that the two are very much hand in hand and support the same values. One is, we look to system of care around strengthening services and supports to children and families, right? And we look to improve the partnerships we have across child serving systems and providers, and to collaborate in system of care. To support health and human service organizations, families, youth organizations, to build coaching skills as core competencies for leaders. So again, touching upon the value of promoting and developing youth and family leaders. Check, right? To develop critical thinking skills for youth, family, and systems. We also want that in system of care. That's what coach approach can do, can really help support. Check that. And last but not least, to support staff retention and empower those with whom we work. And as we know, the workforce, this is a tough one sometimes to keep hold of. A lot of changeover, a lot of turnover. So how can we really support the staff that we need to make the changes and do the work that we need to do in system of care? How can we keep them on board? And an answer is the coach approach. And so what is the coach approach? So to reiterate some of what's been said already, it is a mindset, and it's also a skill set. And it is very intentional in terms of the process. But today we will go into more detail around what is this coach approach mindset? What are the core skill sets? What is it we really need to know and practice in order to bring the coach approach to adaptive leadership to life in our whatever realm we are? And you're with us for an hour and a half. And so this is the preview, the appetizer, so to speak, of what really is a very interactive training that involves practice. And in this limited time that we have, we will not be able to do a lot of that. However, the full training does offer that. So you're getting a snippet of it. To get a sense of really what is this model we're calling coach approach? What does that really look like? And hope that you'll want to know more. I'm going to go a little bit into the coach approach mindset. Okay. One is we believe and we know that there is often more than one right answer to a particular problem, issue, right? And we also know that our role as leaders is to build up others, is to strengthen and empower others. Because at the end of the day, if we are working with people, supporting people who are also supporting us, and they're able to have these skills and empower themselves, it helps us all. It helps them, it helps us in getting the work to move forward. And we support critical thinking, and we do that by being curious and asking questions so that people are able to develop their own solutions. They're not our solutions. They develop their own solutions. And we believe that others are capable and competent. We presume competence when we're working with people. And we also believe that, that there's nobody who is above or beneath getting support. So no matter what level you are in your organization, in your committee or group that you may be in, nobody is above or beneath getting support. We are all learners and we are all teachers at the same time. Now here is the list of the skill sets to coach approach. It all begins with presence and centering. We bring who we are fully and totally. We are present in our interactions. The next skill is listening, and truly listening. Not getting ahead of the person, but really hearing what they're saying. We clarify and reflect. We want to make sure that we truly understand what is being said to us. Next is inquiry, asking good questions. That's bringing that curiosity I mentioned before, and asking those powerful questions that get people to really think about and think through what it is that they're trying to solve. We provide feedback, and we communicate directly on what we're seeing and what we're noticing with the person. We create accountability. So whatever the person has decided, this is the direction I want to go, this is where I want to go, and this is how I'm going to do it. We help support that with that person. How can I help you with that? And then modeling the behavior. That's another huge piece of this work, which is we show up how we want others to show up. We model the way.
What does the brain science tell us? Neuroscience data has really said that our brains are wired for this idea of threats and rewards. This slide lists what our brains seek most: to be safe, to be seen, to have this sense of control, to have a sense of autonomy in knowing that I'm not being micromanaged, that I'm making decisions, that I am moving things forward, to have the sense of certainty, or the ability to predict what will happen, even in this world that is totally unpredictable. And even as leaders, if we can't even, we might not be able to give the answer today, and we might not be able to give the answer tomorrow, but what can we do as leaders to at least provide that sense of certainty to say, I'll continue to look, I'll continue to support, I'll continue to be there. And we want to see situations as fair. There's a book by Dan Siegel called The Power of Showing Up. And it really describes in the research how crucial it is for children and all of us to have this sense of being safe, seen, and heard. As we interact with children, with adults, that first part of being safe and seen is being present. There's a lot of power in showing up with a calming presence so that others can feel this idea of being safe and seen. And then it affects the physiology and the psychology of that individual. And as I said, we are hardwired for this attention bias towards threat. And especially when there's a perception of this imbalance of power. Think about, you're sitting at work, you get an email, very short, from a person in power. I want to talk to you at 4. That's all it said. Where does your perception go? It may jump towards that highest threat level. I'm in trouble, I did something. Our goal in the coach approach model is to provide that additional information in our communication to help us empower those and help them understand their sense of certainty, their sense of self in where they are in these situations. We're trying to reduce that imbalance of power by really helping individuals empower themselves. So we're going to watch a video in just a moment. This is an interaction between a woman by the name of Beth and a staff member by the name of Richard. They work in an intellectual disability program in Maryland. This program has incorporated the coach approach model from management to line works to the individuals that are there in these residential programs to use this idea of the coaching model. So what you're going to see is Beth, who is the supervisor, and Richard, who is the staff. We want you to take notice in this video of who's leading the conversation. Notice the leader coach and their role in the conversation. And notice the leader coachee and their role in the conversation. I will say that in this conversation, Beth would be the leader coach and Richard would be the leader coachee. And we purposely put that term leader in front of each of them. And I think with this video, you'll get a chance to see why we do that.
Good morning, Beth.
Good morning.
Just wanted to know if I could talk to you about a few things. I only have like about 2 minutes though.
Sure.
I have a few concerns, not real big concerns, but I think they need to be addressed.
Sure, absolutely.
One of the things I want to talk to you about is as far as us being job coaches. I think that we need some training in the field of job development.
Okay.
So we have a better mindset of what the job developer or the job specialist does, pertaining to creative options, pertaining to employers, pertaining to the consumer, so we can better serve the consumer as job coaches. And I just wanted to know what you thought about that.
I think that's great. So, have you thought about specifically what would be involved in that kind of a training?
Yeah, one of the things I was thinking about, we most definitely need to have some form of training pertaining to that. It could be employment specialist training. You know, it can be entry level, getting them some information as to what the job calls for, what the responsibilities are. So basically, it would be a thing to where we would be setting them up at an early stage to get the mindset of actually wanting to become employment specialists.
So you're talking about the job coaches that we currently have to raising their level of knowledge through a training.
Yes.
And then kind of grooming them towards becoming employment specialists.
Yes.
Okay. Do you have any resources for where we could get
Well,
that kind of training? Or did you already have something in mind?
Yeah, I was looking at some employment specialists, different curriculums and trainings.
Great.
The way they're out there, free for us to use,
Okay.
and to implement. It's just a matter of getting the job coaches to wrap their mind around the idea of doing that, and it not just being okay. They just giving us another adding to our job description, and we're not getting no extra money.
Right.
So we got to get them to wrap their minds around the fact that this is really cultivating them to be able to do their job as job coaches even better.
Right. So do you think that you would be able to get some of those resources together, or is there something that I can do to help?
Yeah, well, I have a few things already lined up that I've been looking at.
Good.
I want to share them with you to see if that's something that you really would want to consider implementing into training for the job coaches.
Okay.
And it's not brain surgery. It's basically it's an outline of what we can do and how we can better serve the consumer.
So it's something that it's something that everyone from every level would be able to hold on to and understand.
Yes.
And be able to implement.
Yes.
Okay, so what could we do to move forward? Should we set up another time to meet?
If you want to set up another meeting, a time for us to meet, the way we can look over the material. They have a couple of different forms of training.
Okay.
And then we can just look at it, or you can take it and read it at your leisure and come back to me like, well, Richard, I think this one might work better than this one, so let's go ahead and focus on this curriculum and move forward.
Well, I know you need to go. I know you're very busy, so why don't we look at our calendars? I'll email you some dates that I'm available. I'll look for some resources on my end. You look with yours. We'll get together and see what would work best.
All right,
Sound
that
like a
sounds
plan?
good. Sounds like a plan.
All right, great. Thank
All
you.
right, thank you.
Okay, so Beth and Richard just had a very rich conversation, and we have a Zoom poll for you again because we want to know your perspective on who was leading the conversation. So let's start with that and get perspectives on the table. So let's get the Zoom poll up and see what the perspectives are in our community of learners together. So who was leading the conversation? Great. Okay, great. So we have 23% saying that the coach was leading the conversation, and we have 77% saying that the coachee was leading the conversation. And what's really beautiful that we can actually model right here is that there is more than one right answer, right? And yet at the same time, if we were to sort of ask you, the person with the challenge, which was Richard, was really the person who designed the future and designed the solution. So in a way, Beth was leading the intentional conversation, as Val shared with us. This was not a random, loose conversation. It went from the opening to a closing, and Beth did a beautiful job in moving that process forward. And in terms of the process, in terms of the actual content, it really was Richard who brought the ideas to the table. And the moment of truth actually came when Richard laid out the challenge and then he said, and I wanted to know what you thought. And very typically, if you were to watch yourselves, if you were to watch others, that's the moment when the expert voice starts coming out about, well, here's what I think as, as the supervisor or as the team leader. In this case, what did Beth do? She actually threw out a question and they went on a journey that we call partnering side by side each other, each of them taking a role in the conversation. You know, Beth's expertise in this sense was actually holding herself back and really being curious and not knowing and not being the expert in the conversation. And she really, really believed that Richard had the answers and that it was her job to actually grow and develop his critical thinking. It was already inside of him to actually pull it out and really create a sense of empowerment with the person that she was speaking with. Now, in terms of the supervisor, Beth also, by giving the work back to the people, by giving the work back to Richard to solve the problem, she actually didn't take on the work. And I'm now speaking to all the supervisors and project managers that are out there. How often are we the recipients of challenges that people are bringing to us? And we have so much expertise and experience and connections that we actually take on the work, which is really the work of others. And so this is a model that really empowers the other person, builds their critical thinking, builds our workforce so that they are not dependent on the supervisors and or the program managers, and builds that critical thinking. If I were to sort of share with you my experience going around the country and speaking with so many of you in the system of care world these many years, the one thing I hear is that we need more critical thinking in the field. And perhaps we've been a partner in like taking that critical thinking away by answering people's questions and taking on the work of solving things ourselves. So it's a complete reframe. So let's hear from your perspective. You watched the same video, and we want to know, what did you notice about the leader coach? What did you notice about Beth and her role in the conversation? What did she do? What skills did she show, given the skills that Val just shared with you? What stance was she taking? And let's see if we can just get a whole lot of observation from you. And Mark's going to be watching the chat and going to be sort of pouring it out so that we can actually hear from all of you about what you noticed.
Yes, just to start, Ellen, the coach was asking prompting questions, but it was targeted to really help Richard to organize his thoughts and move through the process. We see the idea of reflective listening and genuine interest in wanting to know more. The idea of how she was paraphrasing and committed her support, which was more at the end of that. Intentionally listening and actively listening. And then even related to Richard, he had done his homework. You could tell he put a lot of thought and work into this, and it was his role to present and advocate his idea, and the leader welcomed him and asked intentional questions. Engaged and willing to grow, some support from the coach. She was supportive throughout and asked him questions to provide more details. And Richard was taking more initiative to improve things for his coworkers, which I think the thing I love about the video is we really noticed that this was not necessarily about Richard's goal of improving. It was about his idea of how to improve the workforce. And he was taking on responsibilities for others, to help others explore reflective questions and exploring challenge, being supportive, being flexible, and using the time allotted to reschedule to come back to more information.
Yeah. So, Mark, these are
nice
beautiful. These are just beautiful. Annie, I just love what you just said about the coach believed that the coachee was the expert. She trusted him. You know, that is the foundation. If I'm having a conversation, they believe I'm the expert, I feel safe, I feel seen, I feel heard. I feel valued. And it is at the foundation. And just to sort of reframe what, and really pull out what Val just shared with you, Beth's presence was right on Richard. She wasn't looking at her cell phone. She wasn't reflecting on her emails. She was very, very clear. She was calm. She was centered. She was all in for him. And how often does that happen in our conversations around our workplace and our workspace? One of the things that's so incredible about the coach approach is I know that this is what we are asking clinicians to do with families, with youth, with children. And then we come back into our organizations and we go right back to top down, a lot of telling. So if we're really going to change the system out there, we've got to really take notice about changing the system inside, how our teams work, how our supervision works. And you'll also notice at the very end that Richard designed his commitment, and then Beth asked, how can I help you? What would be useful? And she's offered to set up a next meeting. And so therefore the work continues. So this approach is not, yeah, it all sounds great. No, it ends with a commitment and a conversation around accountability so that they can be partners in making sure that Richard is successful. So Abigail is asking the question, what happens if leaders do not actively take Richard's solutions, right? What happens if leaders do not actively take Richard's solutions? So first of all, you would never walk out of a conversation, a coach approach conversation would never end like that, where one person is one way, one person is another way. No, you have the conversation until you gain a commitment that is actively what you're going to pursue. It may not be as big as we wanted it to be, but it might be some approximation of what we wanted it to be. And it really ends, thank you, Jennifer, with a joint plan of what they both commit to and that how perhaps they'll both hold each other accountable. Now, the coach approach can be actually used in so many different scenarios. And I want to sort of call out what some of those are. And these are things that leaders deal with all the time with their teams, with the people they supervise, and the people they supervise with your teams, and the people you supervise. So here's a list. If we're really talking about shifting, changing priorities, we need a coach approach type conversation. Any type of challenge that comes up, dealing more effectively with change, and how is this impacting our employees and our partners? Building courage and risk taking could be another beautiful opportunity for a coach approach conversation. Facing the unknown, breaking old habits, identifying and addressing performance goals, feeling overwhelmed, languishing, as the New York Times is teaching us, or feeling stressed and anxious, challenges in our relationships, determining next steps, and ever and always how to deal with the diversity in our communities, in our teams, and building more equity and inclusive environments. The coach approach can be used across everything, and we call it an approach because you don't have to go to school for 6 months to learn this. Every single leader can have these skills, can build this muscle for a mindset, and begin approaching our colleagues and our communities in more sustainable and durable ways.
So picking up on what Ellen just shared about how this can be used by anyone to achieve those competencies, those goals, we somewhere along the line developed a coach approach specifically geared to family members. And when I first learned of and was trained in coach approach, one of the first things I wanted to do was I've got to get this out to family members. I just saw the potential. And I was lucky enough to work with the other co-founder of Coach Approach, Beth Greenland, and provide a training in Philadelphia that family members attended. We then took the group of family members who had attended that larger training and had them give their input and shape what it should look like for family members, by family members for family members. And in taking that training, they all spoke to the fact of how it really did transform how they work with other family members. Some of them were peer support partners, working as parent advocates. They really saw how it changed the dynamics so that the family or the parent they were working with now felt empowered and had the voice to show up in a way that they were able to think through what they wanted to do and then take action on it because they had the support through the coach approach. It was just marvelous to witness. So I want to share that. It's very adaptable, very adaptable. And why do we do this? I'm going to quote Maya Angelou. And she wrote, "I've learned that people will forget what you said. People will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel." How you made them feel. And that right there, that's the why. Because if you think about the times in your own life where you truly felt seen and heard, right? And how did that feel? That's the magic. That's who you want to partner with. That's who you want to problem solve and change the world with, right? So shifting the way we communicate, another why. Why should we do that? And so there's a quote from a book entitled Difficult Conversations. It's in very tiny print at the bottom of the slide. And this quote is, anytime we feel vulnerable or our self-esteem is implicated, when the issues at stake are important and the outcome uncertain, when we care deeply about what is being discussed or about the people with whom we are discussing it, there is potential for us to experience the conversation as difficult. And this experience for us is really about the emotions and the feelings that arise in us in these situations, right? And it can trigger us. It can make us want to hold back. And by way of an example, you know, if I am to meet with my supervisor about a project that I did, and I know going into it that there are some places I goofed on the project, right, where I just made some mistakes. That's going to really create some anxiety for me and thinking about coming into that meeting. And how it actually plays out in the discussion that I have with my supervisor will really depend upon his or her way of communicating with me about it. Using the coach approach, the supervisor then can, listen to me, clarify the heart of the matter, ask me questions that provoke critical thinking to help assess, well, what happened with that project? And then I can start to think about, well, this is what happened, and next time around I can do it this way. And to support my accountability when I make that commitment to do so. And what that type of approach does, aside from that individual encounter that I have, is that it creates an organizational shift, a real culture around inviting opportunities for improvement that feel safe, where people are more inclined to take risks and not walk around with this anxiety cloud all the time about, well, what's going to happen. I mean, it really promotes growth and confidence in the workforce, in your people. So in essence, a coach approach to leadership means we are present and focused, and we listen in order to build the sense of being seen. We are curious and we ask questions to build critical thinking skills in the other person and helping that person to build control. We offer mostly positive feedback that will build certainty and safety. And the positive feedback is so key because most of us think about it, we don't probably hear enough of it, right? And we are open to other people's perspectives, what Ellen calls the balcony view up here. And we encourage feedback. And that builds a sense of fairness, that we don't just know it all, that there are other views and perspectives that can be shared.
For the data individuals out there, wanted to share just a little bit of kind of what we're learning. From this implementation of the coach approach. As I said, we started this in 2017 and really rolled it out in 2019 with the trainers. And in all, we've trained about over 516 individuals, from family to youth, to system partners, providers, community organizations. We've hosted about 25 trainings or 25 cohorts. And when we're developing these trainings and when we're advertising the trainings and when we're working with our partner counties, our ask is that you have trainings that are child welfare, juvenile justice, mental health, family, youth, detention facilities, community organizations, all coming to this training together in this idea of system of care. So in Pennsylvania, we've had individuals from about 37 of our 67 counties. We started this in person with classes of about 34, 36, and then COVID happened. And we were stuck. What do we do? We readjusted, made the training from a 2-day in person to a 16 hours over about 5 days, because not many people want to sit in front of a screen for 2 days at about 7.5 or 7 hours a day. And we have some data to show kind of what we're learning from this. Since COVID, we've actually had about 10 cohorts or 10 classes go through the evaluation, and we're still getting some of our data in. So when we really worked and brought this into Pennsylvania as part of our system of care grants, we wrote it into some future years of the grant after the grant had started. We made a true partnership with the Coach Approach partners and helped develop an evaluation. With the evaluation, we utilized the partnership with the Youth and Family Training Institute. They're also the agency or the entity that does our evaluations for our system of care grant. We decided to do this longitudinal study. The longitudinal study looks at the pre and post training. It looks at 30 days out and 120 days out to see how this training is being implemented, to see how the skills are reflecting over time. In working with the Youth and Family Training Institute, we were able to develop what we call our data dashboards. And these are powerful dashboards. It helps us provide high quality training, helps us understand where we're strong, where we're challenged. It allows us to get feedback that is really accurate and sortable by different communities, different race and ethnicity and gender, to really see how this training is impacting the various systems, youth, and family. So as I said, we trained about 516, and we, when I pulled this together, we had about 401 in the evaluation. And this just briefly shows who's taking the training. And you'll see in the gray is in person. Like I said, we had about probably larger classes and more classes in that, and the blue will actually increase a little bit. But you'll see most of our people in the trainings were providers and systems. In the other category, you'll see some education. You'll also see some education in providers. And what you'll also see is this part of system of care, so that we understand that that's why there might be a little bit more systems. An area where we're trying to grow is to how do we get this in front of more youth and families to really start helping change that conversation and build that empowerment. And that's going to be something that we're going to continue to work on to really make sure that we're hitting all of those communities and all of those populations to make sure that they are getting the opportunity to change the conversation. So then we actually looked at the demographics. And one of the things that when I pulled this together, I was really interested in is when we did the training, I kind of wanted to say, well, what does this actually look like compared to Pennsylvania when we look at the race and ethnicity piece? And I was pleasantly surprised. When we look at the figures, the people that we have trained in this coach approach model very closely match the percentages that we are seeing in Pennsylvania. The other thing that we really noticed when we actually went virtual was we were able to get more diverse communities. It eliminated the idea of travel. It eliminated the idea of taking 2 full days off, or even if you had to travel, maybe more than that, to attend this training. Now we can have people from Western Pennsylvania and Eastern Pennsylvania and the Central in the same training, making new connections, making new relationships, so that they can follow up after the training and really support each other. But overall, we're really happy with how we are seeing the data. Overall, we have 90% found the training to be useful to their roles. We did note when people were mandated to attend the training as a corrective action, not a good fit. They gotta really want to change. They have to really want to do this work. We're also seeing how the training is reaching its intended outcomes. And the other interesting thing that we found was that when we went to virtual, it seemed to have a better reach of outcomes and goals than we did when it was in person. Something we're still going to look into. But overall, we're seeing excellent how it's being related and how it's reaching the goals. Then we also look at some pre and post scores. 2 things that we really looked at was presence. We talk about presence every single day. And we see that individuals are increasing from pre and post, their ability to be present and understand what presence is. And we're seeing how individuals are better able to model the behavior. And we're seeing that in the long-term retention as well. To go back to why we do this project, and if it was not for the support of Beth Greenland and Alex Greenland and Ellen Kagan from the Coach Approach Partners and Kagan Leadership Group, we would not be where we are in Pennsylvania. We would not have the opportunity to really develop this work and develop how we're doing things. And we're able to adapt as cultures and things change. Through this partnership, it's really been a great experience. We change conversations, we're leading adaptively, and we're using coaching around all of this to lead change.
And so another thing that I want to share around the evaluation is the family member training and really how it resonated with that group of family members. One family member commented, which is here, quote, "I feel this training was very helpful to me in recognizing faults and strengths. I feel more confident in myself as a family leader to communicate more effectively." And that's one example. Parents shared, and grandparents as well, that they even used it at home. They would go home and, again, they're parenting children or young people who have a variety of behavioral health and even communication needs. And they said that it really shifted the conversation. They went from being at odds with their son and always this argument, they'd start up and then it would turn to an argument. And they would come back and say, guess what? I use this approach and my son and I actually had a real conversation. There was no outburst. There was no arguing. And we actually talked. And he even started sharing with me about this new girlfriend he had. So it created that safe space for those interactions to happen. It impacted them in many, many more ways than they even anticipated.
So you've now had a little taste of what the coach approach to leading change is all about. And for those of you who have been in the field for a long time, I don't think we have to convince you that the conversations that we have really create barriers and create hardships and create obstacles that, if we improve our skills for all the leaders around the table, could actually be resolved. So as Mark said, the coach approach needs to continue from our perspective. And so we're just rolling along. And I was smiling when Mark was talking about the change from in person to virtual, and laughing at myself about how hard that adaptation was, to not be able to touch the flesh and be in a room with all the folks in Pennsylvania. But Beth and I quickly adapted the curriculum to an online training. And we are, as Mark said, not only seeing expansion, but seeing many more diverse people coming to the table and participating. We are partnering with many different systems as well. That was a comment in the chat around what you wanted to learn a little bit about. This is an approach that works across all the different systems. We have a large initiative with early intervention through the Pennsylvania Key, with child welfare, and soon to be in the state of Maryland with child welfare. And additional statewide work across the country. And as Val mentioned, also working with a variety of family organizations now due to her work in Pennsylvania, and sharing the gift of the coach approach, not only with family organizations to work with their families, but also family organizations to build statewide leadership across different states. And shortly in the fall, we're going to be adapting the curriculum for young adults with lived experience. This is a curriculum that should be almost like mental health first aid, is something that we think about that everyone should have. This is like workforce first aid, to really build the strength inside all of the workforce to change the conversation, so that systems of care, that vision of diversity, multiple systems, families, youth, young adults with lived experience, partners across the domain. We have to learn to listen to each other, to go deeper, to create a different conversation. And with that, we really want to offer you the opportunity for more questions, and after we conclude, to find out more about this amazing approach and how it can really make a difference in the system of care communities across the country.
In summary, then, the coach approach is aligned with our system of care values, as we spoke about before, strength-based, and we model how we expect those around us to be supportive with other people. And this is how we engage each other. Secondly, it's an investment in developing others and making our settings more effective and more inclusive. And thirdly, it's a mindset and a skill set to apply so broadly to not only, it says the work we do, but the work we do even in our everyday lives and in our relationships. There's so many places and spaces that this can be used. And it is transformational. If you would like additional information about the coach approach, Ellen's email is here. You can reach out and contact her to learn more, to get more information, or to inquire. Opening it up now for your questions. So please, if you have any questions, put them in the chat.
Yeah, hi. Thank you all so very much. This is Kim Eastup again, and I'm gonna put forward some of the questions that were posed in the chat as you guys were walking through your presentation. And I believe, Ellen, you addressed this somewhat just a couple of slides ago, but I just wanna ask it, and if you guys wanna directly address it. Someone asked, what is the intersection between the coach approach and evidence-based practices, and how do they actually fit together? And so I didn't know if there was more you wanted to add to what you briefly spoke to a few slides ago.
Well, great. Thanks, Kim. So listen, if we were in a room together, you know what my question would be. You would be, well, what do you
What do you
think?
think?
I know.
Because first of all, I'm really curious because I'm sure the person who asked the question has so much more to share, and already has some ideas about how to do this. So this particular approach does not suggest that anything goes. Really, we all understand that there are givens, there are parameters, we have budgets, we have timelines. You know, this doesn't change any of that. But what this does is that it opens up the question of how do we get there? If I'm a person who is struggling with implementing an evidence-based practice, I'm not getting it. And I'm or if you're the supervisor and you're struggling with your staff, the question is, are we going down one approach that we think is the right approach? Or might we use a coach approach to say to the person who's struggling, tell me how you learn. What's the best way to get there? What's holding you back? How can I support you? And that's just, a high touch on the skill of inquiry. But I want to say there are so many ways to get to the end result, ways we can't even think about. And the more we ask our people, the more we give the work of change back to the person who needs to change, the more diverse responses we have and the more possibilities to actually get to the outcomes.
Great. Awesome. Oh, I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to ask Val or Mark if they had any other perspectives.
I think your perspective is right on, Ellen, and it just reminds me of how we would actually use this in the coaching model, is have that person go through the course and then have the discussion to really figure out how they would use it and work the plan out, have them commit to it, and how can we hold the accountability, how they want to do it. Or take the feedback on why it might be a challenge and work together to figure that out.
Great. Awesome. And so another question is, how would you guys advise? I know. But in this virtual setting, it's kind of hard not to go down this route. But how would you actually coach an employee that would prefer to have tasks assigned to them and not engage in kind of that proactive problem solving or critical thinking skill that was demonstrated in the video?
Ellen, you want me to handle this one?
Go for it.
So one of the ideas with the coach approach is that we take the person where they are. And as we use the model, it's not a secret. We're not doing things behind the scenes and asking secret questions that are going to make them coach and be coached. We may provide the answer in the beginning. And as we have the continued relationship, we ask a little bit additional question. Can you give me some clarification? Can you help me understand this better? What do you think might happen if you go the way that you want to go? The person still may need that answer in the end, but as we do this over time, that person can start to think and all of a sudden maybe have that realization that I know the answer. And just because the person was asking for clarification may be able to help that person see it.
Yeah, so the coach approach is like one big tool in a leader's toolkit, right? Because if there is an answer, if there is something that you want the person to do and the person's ready to do it, well, you don't have to go through a whole process. It's like, just have a conversation. It really is the moment where there's a break, there's something not moving. We call that adaptive work for those of you who have been through my leadership training. So the kind of example, Kim, that you just asked about, I would view more as technical work, meaning the perspective between the supervisor and the supervisee are aligned, and we're just kind of like doing the work. But at the same time, the supervisor also needs to start thinking about how do I want to grow and develop this staff member? And that maybe at some point, as Mark said, you sort of pull back and kind of really explore and use a more coach approach to build that critical thinking so that you don't have to keep telling that person what to do, right? That might be one of the goals you might have as a supervisor or as a manager.
Absolutely. Thank you. To follow up to that, I think it brings to mind, it's not like we would all go into the office tomorrow and be like, hey, let's sit and have this conversation, but that there would be a broader conversation and expectations set, right, around experimentation and really wanting to establish kind of a climate and a culture that this could move forward. Right? Like,
yeah, great point, Kim. I mean, it's so obvious. I'm so glad you said it. We don't want to do a surprise dive bomb on anybody.
yeah.
We also talk about this idea of from the get-go in the coach approach model, you establish what this is all about. What kind of conversation I am entering. So today, instead of a regular supervision like you're used to, you would actually say, I'd like to actually explore another way of having a conversation. So what we've also done, Kim, is we've gone into agencies and we've trained the entire staff on this coach approach so that all the leaders have been trained. All of the leaders are seen as leveling the playing field, and the language of the coach approach comes into play, and they're all catching each other, fixing things versus asking a question and saying, what do you think?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. So we have about 3 minutes left. I'm going to jump to another question quickly. Someone asked, would coach approach be a strategy that could be used to mediate a strained relationship between families and service systems?
Val, go ahead.
Yeah, as you asked that question, the first thing that came to my mind is I think about, for example, high fidelity wraparound, right? Part of our system of care. It's really that table where families come together with system partners. And I absolutely do think that this would be a wonderful model to include in those kinds of scenarios. Hi-fi aside, when you're talking about trying to create safety, and let's face it, oftentimes there's a lack of trust between families, youth, and the systems. And so I think it really can be an effective way to navigate that for everyone.
Great. Awesome. So that was we've run out of time. It was our last question. In 30 seconds or less, do you guys have any closing remarks or comments that you would like to share with folks?
So all the different systems have developed beautiful practice models, wraparound, person-centered planning, family teams, but we haven't trained the workforce on how to have those conversations. How. And Mark and Val and I just want to share with you the power of changing that conversation within your practice models can really make the difference between a family flourishing, a team flourishing and thriving, and it coming to a screeching halt and creating those unsafe, untrusting experiences. Across the domain, this was founded in the DD world, and we've brought it to the system of care world. I want to give kudos to Pennsylvania for really taking this really seriously and moving it across the counties so that we can change the conversation.
That is so awesome. Thank you all, Mark Durgan, Ellen Kagan, and Valerie Olds, for sharing your experience and strategies with us today. Thank you to our interpreters, Jessica and Isabella, and thanks to all of you for joining us for this segment of the Training Institute's Live. We really hope that you'll take advantage of the wellness break before you join our next set of workshops that will begin promptly at 3:30. The link is in the chat. If you haven't registered for one of the 2 workshops beginning at 3:30, don't fret, it's not too late. The registration link is in the chat, and you can also use this link to register for future workshops as well. And we would very much also appreciate your taking just a few moments to complete the evaluation for this workshop, and that link is also posted in the chat. We take your feedback seriously, and it will help us shape the upcoming workshops in the series. And again, thank you so, so much for joining us today. And we really look forward to seeing you after the break and on the first Thursday of every month for Training Institutes Live. Have a great afternoon, everyone.